The emergency alarm screamed through the massive space station that served as the heart of the Galactic Council. In the central chamber, beings from dozens of worlds gathered around a flickering holographic display. The blue light made their strange faces look even more alien as they watched the desperate message play again and again. Ambassador Thelos stood at the center of it all. His body looked like it was made of living crystal, and tubes connected to his face helped him breathe the station's artificial air. His crystalline fingers shook as he replayed the transmission for the 5th time. The voice that filled the chamber was high and musical, but filled with terror. It belonged to colony leader Vexai, one of the Villani people who lived on a distant world called Kepler-4 for to see. The Villani looked like giant insects, but they were peaceful creatures who spent their time creating beautiful art and thinking deep thoughts about the universe. This is colony leader Vexai of the Villani settlement on Kepler-4 for to see. The voice chittered through the universal translation system. We are under attack by the Korthok horde. Our defenses have fallen. They consume everything in their path. Please, anyone who receives this message, we have perhaps 3 rotations of our sun before complete extinction. Our children hide in the deep tunnels, but the Korthok are digging them out one by one. They eat the living. Show no mercy. If anyone can hear this, please help us. The transmission ended with the sound of explosions and screaming. There was only static. The chamber fell silent. Even the soft humming of the station's life support systems seemed too loud. Delegate Murthic, a creature with 4 arms and purple skin, began to tremble. His species had lived through a Korthok attack 50 years ago. Only a few thousand of his people had survived by hiding in deep space. The Korthok horde, Murthok whispered, his voice barely audible.
Ali.
They have devoured 17 colonies in the Outer Rim territories. No survivors ever. They leave nothing but empty worlds and picked clean bones. Ambassador Thelos touched his console with trembling fingers. Holographic displays showed the current positions of all military forces in the galaxy. The news was not good. Our nearest peacekeeping fleet is 18 standard days away, Thelos announced to the gathered delegates. The Hegemon Empire's forces are fully engaged with the spiral conflict in the Andromeda sector. The Villani colony has maybe 3 days before the Korthok finish their ... harvest. A voice came from the darkest corner of the chamber. Then they are lost, just like all the others. We should begin preparing refugee camps for the survivors, though there will not be any. The delegates began to murmur among themselves. Some suggested sending a memorial probe to record the Villani's final moments for historical purposes. Others wanted to evacuate the nearby systems before the Korthok moved on to their next target. Then Thylos stopped moving. His crystalline form went completely still as he stared at his console. Wait, he said slowly. There is one option, something we have never used before. He pressed several buttons and new information appeared on the main display. The other delegates leaned forward to read it. Article 7 of the Emergency Protocols, Thylos read aloud, the Deathworld contingency. In cases of extreme emergency, where all conventional military options are unavailable, the Council may request assistance from species classified as Deathworld survivors. A collective shudder ran through the assembled aliens. They all knew what that meant, though none of them wanted to say it out loud. In the galaxy, there were worlds so dangerous that most species would die within hours of landing on them. Were called Deathworlds, and very few intelligent species had ever evolved on such planets. But there was one species that had not only survived on a death world, but had thrived there. They came from the 3rd planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star in a quiet corner of the galaxy. Their world was covered in deadly storms, poisonous creatures, diseases that could kill in days, and natural disasters that happened without warning. Most civilized species considered them to be barely controlled savages. They fought constantly among themselves, turned everything into a weapon, and seemed to enjoy violence in ways that disturbed more peaceful races. They called themselves humans, humanity. Thylos whispered the name like it was a curse. They are the only military force close enough to reach the Villani in time. The chamber erupted in nervous chatter. Some delegates protested that humans were too primitive and violent to trust with a rescue mission. Others worried that sending humans might only make things worse. But as they argued, another transmission came through from the Volani colony. This one was even shorter and filled with more screaming. Thylos made the decision without taking a vote. His crystalline fingers moved across the console, and within minutes, a quantum transmission was racing through space toward the Sol system. The message was simple and direct. 12 billion Volani civilians face extinction within 72 hours. Korthok Horde has overwhelming numbers. Send your warriors immediately. Coordinates attached. As the transmission disappeared into the darkness between stars, the assembled delegates could only wait and hope that Earth's most dangerous children would answer the call. The spaceship called Silent Runner moved through the darkness between stars like a ghost. It was painted black and covered with special materials that made it invisible to most sensors. Inside the ship, 12 people sat around a glowing table that showed a three-dimensional image of a distant planet. Colonel Kim was the leader of this small group. He was a quiet man with steady hands and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He had fought in more wars than most people could count, and his calm voice never showed fear, even when facing impossible odds. The planet spinning slowly above the table was called Kepler 4 for Deci, and it was dying. Orange and red lights flickered across its surface where cities burned. The Korthok Horde had been attacking for 2 days, and soon there would be nothing left but empty ground and bones. 10,000 Korthok warriors are down there, Kim said, pointing at the hologram. Each one is about 8 feet tall and weighs as much as 3 normal humans. Their skin is like natural armor, and they carry weapons that can melt through steel. They have never lost a battle. They have never left anyone alive on the worlds they attack. The other 11 people around the table listened carefully. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were the most dangerous fighters that Earth could find on short notice. Each one came from a different military unit, but they all had one thing in common. They were very good at killing things that needed to be killed. Sergeant Park had been born in Korea and trained in the mountains where the snow never melted. He could move so quietly that even electronic sensors could not detect him. He leaned forward and asked, "What do we know about how they fight?" Lieutenant Lee was the team's scout. Her job was to watch the enemy and learn their secrets. She had studied every piece of information they could find about the Korthok. They use fear as a weapon, she explained. Numbers make lots of noise and try to terrify their enemies into giving up. They also eat the people they defeat, which makes other species too scared to fight back. Captain Choi was an expert with explosives. He could make bombs out of almost anything and could blow up a building so precisely that the one next to it would not even lose a window. He smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "Sounds like they have never fought humans before," he said. The others nodded. Humans were different from most species in the galaxy. Other intelligent races had evolved on peaceful worlds where cooperation and logic were the keys to survival. Humans had evolved on Earth, where everything tried to kill them every single day. This made them very good at fighting, but it also made them protective of innocent life. Staff Sergeant Nam was the team's medic. His job was to keep the others alive when they got hurt. But he had also studied the Volani people they were going to save. "The Volani are very fragile," he warned. "They look like large insects, but their bodies are delicate. We will need to be very careful not to hurt them by accident while we are fighting the Korthok." The ship's computer announced that they were getting close to their destination. Through the windows, they could see the planet growing larger. The orange glow was getting brighter. They could make out individual fires burning across the surface. Colonel Kim stood up and looked at each member of his team. "The rest of the galaxy thinks we are monsters," he said. "They think we are barely civilized savages from a death world. Today, we are going to show them what monsters can do when they choose to protect innocent people." As the Silent Runner entered the planet's atmosphere, it used special technology to remain invisible. The ship was designed for secret missions, and even the most advanced sensors could not detect it. Corporal Song was the team's communications expert. She listened to radio transmissions from the surface and translated what the Korthok were saying. They are celebrating, she reported. They think they have already won. They are talking about which parts of the planet they will eat first. The 12 humans looked at each other. If the Korthok could have seen those looks, they would have stopped celebrating immediately. There was something in the humans' eyes that spoke of ancient fury and protective instincts that went back to the caves and forests of prehistoric Earth. The Korthok horde had conquered 17 worlds. They had eaten billions of innocent people. They had never faced an enemy that fought back effectively. They thought of themselves as the ultimate predators in the galaxy. But they had made one critical mistake. They had threatened a species that humans had decided to protect. And when humans decided to protect something, they became more dangerous than any nightmare the galaxy had ever imagined. The silent runner landed in a forest far from the burning cities. As the 12 humans checked their weapons and equipment, they could hear the distant sounds of destruction. Somewhere out there, innocent people were dying while monsters celebrated. That was about to change. The Korthok were about to learn the difference between conquest and war. They were about to discover what happened when Earth's most dangerous children decided that something was worth fighting for. Warchief. Grathos was a monster even by Korthok standards. He stood nearly 9 feet tall, with thick scales that could stop most weapons and claws that could tear through metal. His massive body cast a long shadow across the burning ruins of what had once been the most beautiful building on the Villani. World. The cultural center had been a place of art and learning, where the insect like Villani had created music and poetry that could make other species weep with joy. Now it was nothing but twisted metal and broken stone. Grathos stood on top of the wreckage like a king surveying his kingdom. Below him, his warriors were having fun. They dragged terrified Villani from the rubble where they had been hiding. The Villani looked like large praying mantises, but they were gentle creatures who had never hurt anyone. Their thin limbs shook with fear as the Korthok warriors grabbed them with massive claws. Soon, little insects, Grathos roared, his voice echoing across the destroyed city. You will join your ancestors in our bellies. Your meat will make us strong, and your bones will decorate our ships. Cheered and howled. This was how it always went. They would arrive at a peaceful world, kill everything that moved, eat what they wanted, and take the rest as food for their long journeys between stars. They had done this 17 times before, and it never got old. But something was different. This time, the first sign of trouble came from the edge of the city. Guard posts that should have been reporting in every few minutes went silent. At first, the commanders thought their soldiers were just being lazy or were distracted by the celebration. The Korthok were not known for their discipline when victory was certain. But then, more guards stopped responding, and more. Within an hour, the entire outer perimeter had gone quiet. In the shadows between burning buildings, death moved on silent. Sergeant Park had been trained in the mountains of Korea, where a single sound could start an avalanche that would kill everyone for miles. He knew how to move without making any noise at all. The Korthok guard never heard him coming. One moment the warrior was standing at his post, enjoying the screams from the city center. The next moment, a blade sliced across his throat so quickly that he did not even have time to feel surprised. Strong hands dragged his body into the darkness between 2 collapsed buildings, where it would not be found until much later, 3 kilometers away. Lieutenant Lee lay on top of a tall building that had not yet been destroyed. She looked through a special scope that could see in the dark and count enemies from great distances. Her voice was barely a whisper as she spoke into her radio. I can see 47 hostiles in the main square, she reported. About 200 more scattered throughout the district. They are not being careful. They think they have already won. Colonel Kim's voice came back through the radio, calm and steady. Copy that. Remember, we are not here to fight fair. We are here to win. At exactly 3:47 in the morning, local time, the night exploded. Captain Choi had spent hours crawling through the ruins, placing small bombs in exactly the right places. He had studied the Korthok supply lines and figured out where they kept their weapons, food, and their communication equipment. When he pressed the button on his remote control, all of those places blew up at the same time. The explosions lit up the sky like artificial suns. The Korthok supply depot vanished in a ball of fire that could be seen from space. Their ammunition storage exploded in a chain reaction that shook the ground for miles. Most importantly, their communications center was completely destroyed, which meant the different groups of Korthok could no longer talk to each other. In the chaos that followed, the real nightmare began. Most species in the galaxy fought in predictable ways. They lined up their armies, charged at each other, and the side with more soldiers usually won. It was civilized and honorable, even when it was deadly. Humans did not fight that way. They came from the shadows like ghosts. They killed guards silently and vanished before anyone noticed. They set traps that exploded when stepped on. They used the Korthok's own weapons against them. Most confusing of all, they seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Korthok had always hunted in packs like wolves. When they found prey, they would surround it and attack from all sides. This had always worked before because their enemies were scared and confused, but the humans turned this strength into a weakness. When the Korthok gathered in groups to hunt, the humans would attack the groups. When they spread out to search, the humans would pick them off one by one. It did not matter what the Korthok did. The humans seemed to have an answer for everything. War-Chief Graithos stood in the ruins of his command post, trying to understand what was happening. Half of his warriors had stopped reporting in. The other half were panicking and shooting at shadows. For the first time in his long life of conquest, he felt something he had never experienced before: fear from their hiding places. The surviving Villani watched in amazement as there would be. Destroyers began to destroy each other in their confusion and terror. By the time the second sun rose over the burning city, everything had changed. Mighty Korthok horde, which had conquered 17 worlds without losing a single battle, was hiding behind makeshift walls in the center of the ruined capital. They had dragged pieces of broken buildings together to make a fortress, but it looked more like a prison. War Chief Graithos paced back and forth inside the barricade like a caged animal. His massive claws scraped against the metal floor with each step, making a sound that set everyone's nerves on edge. Around him, his surviving warriors crouched behind cover, their weapons pointed at shadows that might not even be there. Chief Victor was the second in command, and he was just as confused as his leader. His reptilian face was twisted with anger and fear, two emotions that did not mix well in a Korthok brain. "They are not fighting like warriors," he snarled, his voice cracking with frustration. "They strike from darkness like cowards, use our own weapons against us, and they seem to learn our patterns faster than we can change them." This was the worst part. Korthok were used to fighting enemies who were scared and confused. These humans seemed to study everything the Korthok did, then find ways to use it against them. It was like fighting an enemy that could read their minds. Graithos stopped pacing and stared at the tactical display screen. It showed the positions of all his forces throughout the city, or at least it was supposed to.
Ow.
Red dots that represented his warriors kept disappearing from the screen one by one. Each time a dot vanished, it meant another of his soldiers was dead. "How many of them are there?" Graithos demanded, his voice shaking with rage. The intelligence officer was a smaller Korthok, whose job was to count enemies and figure out their plans. He stared at his instruments with disbelief. "The thermal scans show 12 heat signatures, sir. Just 12. 12. Graithos roared so loudly that dust fell from the ceiling. "You are telling me that 12 primitives from a backward world have reduced my horde to this?" But it was true. The thermal scanners did not lie. There were only 12 humans on the entire planet, and they had turned 10,000 Korthok warriors into a frightened mob that was afraid of its own shadow. What the Korthok did not understand was how the humans fought, instead of staying together. As one group, they had split into 4 teams of 3 people each. Each team had a different job, and they worked together like parts of a machine designed for killing. Corporal Song led one team that specialized in destroying communications. For 18 hours straight, they had crawled through the ruins, finding every radio, every computer, every piece of equipment the Korthok used to talk to each other. They smashed some with hammers, blew up others with small explosives, and reprogrammed. the rest to send false information. Now the different groups of Korthok could not coordinate their attacks or call for help. Sergeant Nam led another team, and his medical training turned out to be more useful than anyone had expected. He knew how bodies worked, which meant he also knew how to make them stop working. He studied the Korthok anatomy and found the weak spots in their natural armor. He taught the other humans exactly where to strike to cause the most damage with the least effort. Captain Choi had turned the entire city into a weapon. He placed explosives in buildings that would collapse when the Korthok walked by. He rigged doorways to explode when opened, even turned the city's water supply into a trap, filling the pipes with chemicals that would make the Korthok sick. If they drank it, every street corner, every building, every piece of infrastructure became something that might kill them. But it was Colonel Kim who broke their spirits completely. He had captured some of the Korthok communication equipment and figured out how to use it. Instead of sending threats or demands for surrender, he did something much more frightening. He began broadcasting the names of dead Korthok warriors. Every few minutes, Kim's calm voice would come over the radio, speaking in perfect Korthok language. He would simply read a list of names. Thokamar of the Bloodclaw clan, Vexai of the Iron Scale tribe, Grokthos of the Bone Eater pack. Each name belonged to a Korthok who had died in the last 2 days. The effect on the survivors was devastating. Hearing the names of their dead comrades pronounced perfectly by an enemy they could not see made them feel like they were being hunted by ghosts. Some of the younger warriors began to whisper that the humans were not really alive. They were spirits of vengeance sent by the gods to punish the Korthok for their crimes. By the time the third day dawned, the mighty Korthok horde had been reduced to fewer than 300 terrified warriors. They huddled together in small groups, jumping at every sound, firing their weapons at shadows that might not even be there. They had come to this world as confident predators, but now they were nothing but frightened prey. The hunters had become the hunted, and they did not like it at all. The morning sun painted the sky orange and red as it rose over the destroyed city. In the distance, a single figure ran desperately toward a small spacecraft hidden among the ruins.
Ow.
It was the last surviving Korthok warrior, a young soldier who had watched his entire unit die during the night. His name was Krakter, and he had been part of the mighty Korthok horde for only 2 years. He had joined because he wanted to be part of something powerful and feared throughout the galaxy. Now all he wanted was to escape this nightmare planet and warn others about the terrible creatures that lived here. He could see his escape ship. Just ahead was a small scout vessel that could carry him back to Korthok's space, where he could tell the High Command what had happened. His clawed feet slipped on the loose rocks as he ran, but he did not slow down. Behind him, the city burned like the fires of hell. 3 kilometers away, Lieutenant Lee lay perfectly still on top of a broken building. She had been watching the last Korthok through her rifle scope for 10 minutes, waiting for the perfect shot. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger as she controlled her breathing. Last target in sight, she whispered into her radio. Permission to engage. Colonel Kim's voice came back immediately. Take the shot. No survivors. Lee adjusted her aim slightly and squeezed the trigger. The bullet traveled faster than sound, crossing the distance in less than 2 seconds. It struck Krakter in the back of the head, killing him instantly. His body tumbled forward and lay still in the dust, just 50 meters from his escape ship. Target eliminated, Lee reported. All hostiles are now confirmed dead. The battle was over. The Korthok horde, which had devoured 17 worlds and killed billions of innocent people, no longer existed. 10,000 warriors had been reduced. 2 0x12 humans in just 4 days, but the victory had come at a cost. 4 of the human soldiers would never go home. They had died fighting to protect people they had never met, on a world they had never seen before. Their names were Sergeant Park, Staff Sergeant Nam, Captain Choi, and Corporal Song. They had given their lives so that others could live. When the shooting finally stopped, the Villani began to emerge from their hiding places. They had spent 4 days cowering in underground tunnels and secret rooms, listening to the sounds of battle above. Many of them had been sure they would die, But now they found themselves blinking in the sunlight of a new day. Colony leader Vexhai was among the first to approach the human survivors. The elderly Villani's insect-like body shook with emotion as he looked at the 8 humans who had saved his people. Large compound eyes reflected the morning light like jewels. "How?" was all he could manage to say. His voice was barely a whisper. Colonel Kim looked around at the destruction. Bodies of dead Korthok littered the streets. Buildings lay in ruins. The beautiful city that had once been the pride of the Villani civilization was now a graveyard. But the people were alive, and that was what mattered. "We are very good at protecting what matters," Kim said simply. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than the speed of light. Quantum communication networks carried the impossible story to every corner of known space. The Galactic Council called an emergency session that was so crowded that many delegates had to stand in the hallways. Ambassador Thelos stood at the center of the great chamber, his crystalline body reflecting the lights like a living prism. In his hands, he held the official report of what had happened on Kepler 442. See, even he could barely believe what he was reading. "The human species classification has been updated," he announced to the stunned assembly. "They are no longer listed as developing primitives. The new designation is Apex Protector Species." The change rippled through galactic society like a shockwave. Species that had once dismissed humans as barbaric savages suddenly began to see them in a new light. Creatures from the Deathworld were not just mindless killers. They were protectors of the innocent, guardians who would fight impossible odds to save those who could not save themselves. Within days, new messages began arriving at Earth's communication centers. But these were not desperate screams for help, like the one from the Villani. These were formal, respectful requests for assistance. The tone was completely different. Instead of begging, the messages were polite invitations. "The Zephyrian Republic requests the honor of human protection during our colonial expansion. The Hegemony of Worlds formally invites Earth to join our Defense Council. The Peaceful Alliance would be grateful for human advisors in our military." Planning back on Earth. Colonel Kim stood in a quiet room filled with memorial plaques. Each plaque bore the name of a human soldier who had died protecting others. The wall was already covered with thousands of names, and now Kim had to add. For more, he carefully engraved the names of his fallen comrades into the metal, making sure each letter was perfect. Behind him, communication officers worked at dozens of computers, processing the flood of requests for help that arrived every hour. Humanity had finally found its place in the galaxy. They were not conquerors seeking to build an empire. Were not politicians trying to gain power. They were something much more important. They were the guardians that others called when hope seemed lost.